My name is Greg Nilgis, and today's video is in support of Sonoran Desert Institute's FTH 212 striker fired handgun course. And today's date is 2 June 2024. There's no live ammunition in the workspace, and the firearm I'll be using has a clean feed source, and I have visually and physically inspected the chamber to ensure we do have a clear and safe firearm. The firearm I'm using here is a Glock G22 Gen 2. This particular firearm is a Detroit Police Department turn-in weapon that was well used when I picked it up. This was my first striker fired gun that I purchased. I've had it for probably about 12 years, and I've refurbished it. I Duracoated the slide a nice pretty gray, and I've replaced the barrel and put different sights on it, and took out the crappy New York trigger and put in a OEM Glock trigger for it, and some other stuff, some other upgrades. Got a Crimson Trace laser grip laser on it, and some other nice features. So that's the firearm I'll be using for this part one and part two of this video. The schematic I've got here shows both the depiction and the list of the parts, and this is out of the Complete Glock Reference Guide, 3rd edition, by Tatuma, published by Tatuma Productions. And that's part one. Okay, for part two of the video, we still have no live ammunition. We don't have a functioning firearm in the workspace. Some of the tools that you would need to assemble a firearm: bench blocks comes in very handy. A hammer, you may or may not need this to drive the pins out. In most Glocks, my experience, you don't need a hammer. You can even use the end of a screwdriver as a type of a hammer because you don't need much. Some type of a pin or a punch to drive the pins out. Tools you would use to take measurements. A ruler comes in very handy. A caliper, if you have one, a micrometer. Those are pretty much standard. And some dimensions you might measure and why. Roll pins. These roll pins are out of the PSA Dagger kit. Roll pins are easily damaged and a commonly replaced part, almost not a wear and tear, but if you're taking these in and out very often, you're going to have to replace them. So you could use a ruler or the caliper to measure the length, caliper to measure the diameter to get replacements. That's one thing. Springs. You could use a ruler or the caliper to measure the length of the spring, maybe the number of coils as a dimension as well, and compare that to a new or a known good spring if the spring you have is in question, whether it's whichever type of spring it is. So those are some of the dimensions you might be concerned with. Others might be your firing pin or striker protrusion. You could use a firing pin protrusion gauge for that if you needed to. Trigger pull gauge to measure the trigger pull, but we're asked to discuss a disassembled firearm, and those wouldn't be for a disassembled firearm. Any tools needed for this platform are not discussed in this module. Yes, the striker channel insert. To remove it, you need a tool similar to this that threads in, so you can pull that channel out, and then the other end used to replace and put a new channel liner in. Something like that comes in handy. These forceps come in very handy because you can reach into small places, and you can also grab the part by locking the forcep in together, and it'll hold the part even if you let go of the handles. That comes in handy. And one of these picks right here, something like this, they come in different shapes. These come in very handy. Any components you believe would require extra finesse to disassemble, yes, and this pick is a prime example. To get to the magazine release spring on the inside of the magazine channel of the frame, to reach in there, something like this, or even a screwdriver is good, and that requires some finesse to do and some practice. Are there any components you feel would cause frustration? That one right there can, if you've not done it before. That's probably the most difficult part of disassembling a Glock type firearm. Not hard, but again, it takes a little bit of practice to get it right, so that might frustrate some people. Any components could be easily lost, absolutely. Roll pins or any type of pin like that. Small springs, I don't have a small spring in front of me, but small springs could be lost. And small pins, those are typically your smaller parts you got to keep track of. And it would help to have one of these boxes like this. I have a number of them. I have several firearms disassembled at any given time, So I'll have the parts for one in one box and parts for another box so they don't get mixed up, which would be a bad thing. These are very inexpensive. And last, does the firearm model you choose contain many components or only a few? And what does this mean for the gunsmith? I don't think it contains that many, really. It's 36 in accordance with the schematic. I've added a couple with the Crimson Trace grip and this frame plug that has these pins on it. But still not very many. If memory strikes me correct, 1911 A1 is, I think, 48 parts. So in that regard, it's fewer parts than some of the more antiquated, I hate to use that word, designs. So that makes it a little simpler for the gunsmith to disassemble, simpler to keep track of that smaller number of parts, and simpler to reassemble. And that completes part 2.